Rain of Fire monster explained in detail. It is thoroughly okay to call the 2002 post-apocalyptic science fantasy flick Rain of Fire criminally underrated for obvious reasons. For starters, a movie that stars Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey, and Gerard Butler, along with dragons, can be anything but bad. Well, it is a different story that it can be critically failed or have mixed reviews for that matter, but a film that puts together medieval mythology and the modern era serves more like an edge-of-your-seat thriller. Released by Touchstone Pictures, Rob Bowman's Rain of Fire won Festival de Cine de Sitges Award in the Best Visual Effects category. The movie was also nominated for a Saturn Award in the Best Fantasy Film category, but sadly it lost to Peter Jackson's epic fantasy adventure flick, The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. One can only give credits to time and the diehard fans of the genre for not letting a flick like this fall into obscurity. Here's breaking the film down into a few parts. First comes the story, which is pretty simple on the surface. Dragons emerge from underground, post-hibernation, and wreak havoc on Earth. Now, that's not a spoiler, that is just the entire premise of the movie. So, there is this dilapidated dystopian future inhabited by a few survivors and pocket groups. They use very finite resources and weapons to keep their little pods of people alive. They would not stand a chance against the massive, overpowering forces in a head-to-head battle. The characters are interesting, with a way of portraying the hardships of life in the film.
One dragon down, 3 men dead, oh yeah. But you go ahead. Have your little...
But mind you, the film itself isn't depressing at all. It is a very fascinating take on a dystopian future, a future that is primarily based on ash. Agreed, that is not the cleverest of films made, but it certainly makes out a lot of what's given. As far as dragon-themed films are concerned, this film does justice to the dragon. No, it does not drive a stake through a dragon's heart. These beasts are daunting. There are thousands of them, each capable of wiping 1,000s of humans. In today's video, we will not be only exploring the movie, but also take a look at the dragons that are featured in detail.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
The movie plot. Post the beginning of the 21st century, during construction of the London Underground, a humongous dragon awakens from hibernation and instantaneously incinerates all the construction workers with its fiery breath. The sole survivor of the incident happens to be a young boy called Quinn Abercrombie, whose mother, the project engineer of the construction crew, gets crushed to death while protecting him. With the dragon making his way out of the underground and flying away, many more begin to appear, multiplying at a rampant rate. Many years pass by and Quinn is now an adult, who has since escaped from the underground cave, been storing records to keep track, and try and make sense of what had happened since that catastrophic day. He, along with his best friend, Creedy, led a small community of survivors in a medieval stone castle in Northumberland. They plan on outlasting the dragons till they go back into hibernation. While the community did manage to plant crops, they were literally starving whilst waiting impatiently for the crops to ripen. With some renegade members of the community sneaking out to loot the crops early, they managed to capture the attention of a nearby dragon, who not only attacks the group but also burns down their entire food supply.
Keep going, come on!
This leaves the community without any resources to feed itself. Soon enough, a heavily armed American group led by Denton Van Zandt arrived there in an armored convoy with the Chieftain, tank, and Augusta Westland AW-109 utility helicopter. The squad happens to be the Kentucky Irregulars, who were some of the last surviving military dragon hunters in quest of finding a safe haven. They were on their way to London. While initially doubtful that the group was nothing but pillagers, Van Zandt eventually had to gain the trust of Quinn by sharing with him the primary weakness of the dragon. He states that the creatures have poor vision before sunset, something that has let Van Zandt's crew slay many of their kind. And while Quinn was still hesitant on providing them shelter, he assessed their artillery and instead decided to take a diplomatic approach and allow them in. Together, they are still able to kill the dragon that had destroyed the crops earlier. The survivors celebrate their victory later in the castle at night, and Van Zandt introduces his team helicopter pilot and intelligence officer Alex Jensen to Quinn. After slaying almost 200 dragons, Alex makes a startling discovery. All of the dragons were female. Next, she predicates that the creatures reproduce rapidly because the species were dependent on a single male for populating the entire species. Having traced the spread of the dragons, they come to a conclusion that the male was nestled somewhere in London, and if they're able to kill it, it will efficaciously prevent the dragons from breeding. Although Quinn harbors suspicions about the male dragon being the same creature that was responsible for his mother's death, he refuses to aid them. He knew very well that London was a hotbed for dragons, and if they failed in their mission, the dragons would trace them back to their shelter and wreak unthinkable havoc.
I said no! No, Quinn!
In spite of Quinn's objections and a physical fight, Van Zandt enlists the best defenders of the castle that include Jared, an orphan that Former had saved as a child, and the one he was preparing to lead the community. Van Zandt departs with some of the castle's men, but as Quinn had feared, their convoy gets ambushed by the dragon while on their way to London. Everyone except Van Zandt and Alex get killed in action. The male dragon follows their trail back, finds the castle, destroys it, and kills many unsuspecting inhabitants in the process. Quinn manages to get survivors into a bunker, one that is designed to survive the intense heat, but somehow they get trapped when the dragon returns. It is during the dragon's final attack that Creedy also gets killed. Fueled in equal parts by the memory of his mother's death at the hands of the male dragon in his youth, and the hatred stemming from the destruction of the death of his people, and he had been trying to save all the while, Quinn puts Jared in charge of the community, and makes up his mind to aid Van Zandt and Alex in hunting down the dragon and destroying him once and for all. They fly to London and are shocked to discover a countless number of small dragons, one of which is devoured by the male dragon. This disperses the smaller ones and leaves the male dragon unguarded. Van Zandt comes up with a simple plan: split up, lure the male dragon into attacking, and then fire explosives down his throat. While the plan initially worked in their favor, the dragon manages to ignite the explosives early. Seeing no other option left, Van Zandt sacrifices himself as a distraction. Quinn and Alex manage to assemble the last remaining explosives, and together they are able to tempt the dragon to ground level. Luckily for the duo, it's the magical hour when the dragon's vision is weak. That's when Quinn shoots another explosive right into the mouth of the dragon, killing the beast. 3 months later, Quinn and Alex are setting up a radio tower. There have been no dragon sightings since the male dragon was slayed. Jared arrives to inform them that they have contacted a group of French survivors who wish to speak to their leader. Quinn publicly makes Jared the leader of the community and commits himself to reconstructing civilization with Alex. The film stars a pretty good cast. There are 2 primary characters of Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey, and 2 very good supporting characters essayed by Gerard Butler and Isabella Scorupco. So, these characters are easy to root for. Bale is incredible at playing a solemn down on his luck kind of guy. McConaughey, on the other hand, plays on the surface a very happy-go-lucky American army guy, one who wades into the situation and seems to be the human villain in the movie. It is great to see him play that role, and he looks the part. He has no hair, a big beard, and looks gritty and grimy, a total badass. Initially, it is assumed that he and his men were the antagonists, but with the movie unfolding, one understands that they just seem to be having a different approach towards things. Bowman's Reign of Fire is surprisingly exciting and thoroughly entertaining post-apocalyptic flick that has slipped under the radar during its initial release, primarily due to its mixed reviews that it received. Featuring an incredible cast prior to their A-list status, we highly recommend that you check this film out if you still haven't. If you are someone who is a fan of dragons, gothic and dilapidated imagery, and dystopian future kind of films, this flick is definitely for you. Dragons from Reign of Fire explored. Right in the very beginning of the film, it is explained that the dragons that we had once thought of as myths, fabricated by our ancestors, were actually real. In fact, they were accountable for wiping out the dinosaurs as well as the majority of plant life on the planet. After the earth was covered in ash, thanks to these creatures raising it with fire, they went into hibernation waiting for their food source to replenish, repeating the cycle over a period of millions of years. For years, they lay deep beneath the surface of the earth until a construction crew dug a little too deep. Awakening awakening the prehistoric predator and releasing their kind into our world once again. The dragons on display were essentially exceedingly evolved in prehistoric creatures that rested dormant beneath the surface of the earth for millions of years. These dragons were large, four-limbed behemoths with extremely powerful wings, allowing them to fly in the air with speed and precision. They also had a unique gland in their mouth which was capable of producing an inflammable substance that could instantly be ignited. The method by which the dragons emitted fire in the movie was actually inspired by real animals. Two ones, in fact: the spitting cobra and the bombardier beetle. Now, the fire that which the dragons could breathe was their primary weapon, produced in the two glands located at the back of their mouths, either side of their tongues. When mixed together, the liquid proved to be highly combustible. Though the creatures were driven by instinct, they also displayed a measure of intelligence, which, coupled with their fight and flight, fire-breathing abilities, re-solidified their title as the apex predator on Earth.
It's on me!
These are three probable possibilities for how the dragon numbers were able to spread so quickly. The first theory is that the female dragons had also been hibernating and were awakened by either the sole male dragon through the blaze of destruction or by the people in their continuous efforts to destroy the beast. The second theory is that the male dragon went around to fertilize the egg that had been laid by the female dragons during the prehistoric era. The third and last theory might sound a little crazy, but it is quite possible that the male dragon is actually the progenitor of the species and may be capable of creating female offspring, and then he could mate with them to further produce dragons.
Was a female. There was at least one egg, probably.
As with dragons continuing to take over the earth, this gave them time to grow into adults, allowing the male dragon to procreate at a rapid pace. The elusive dragon was extremely large, many times the size of the female dragons that were responsible for the near extinction of humankind. Their hunting strategy was very simple: either burn the prey and eat the toasty remains, or simply swoop down with tremendous speed and agility to take a bite. Over time, as their human and animal food sources become scarcer, the creatures were actually seen resorting to cannibalism as they grew more and more desperate, as this was the catalyst that sent them into deep hibernation many times before. It can be predicted that the dragons were just a few years away from restarting the very same cycle to ensure their survival.
Roger that!
The dragons on display don't have personalities. They are pure killing machines. The film is set in a dystopian future, after dragons rise from under the earth and basically cause the end of the majority of humanity. This is entirely believable, considering that a dragon is the ultimate predator. As far as the overall visuals, look of the film, and of course the special effects are concerned, they do pull it off. The fact that the dragons are for the most part CGI, very good CGI to be precise, they look fantastic, especially in the scenes where they utilize fire. It just goes without saying that these creatures steal the film, and the movie is about them.
This is my home. I'm asking the questions. What are you doing here?
Reign of Fire could have been one of the greatest trilogies. Well, there were a lot of surrounding questions with the movie that were left unanswered. To begin with, how did the character of Bale survive the initial days of the dragon outbreak? How did society fall apart? How did they first come up with the survival community? How did the Americans learn to fight? What is Denton Van Zandt's backstory? What are the other communities out there? The film was quite vague in reference to these set of questions. According to the fans, here is what they think should have happened. Episode 1 could have just begun like the movie did, but taking place in the following days of the dragon burning down London. Here's where the viewers could get to see how the survivors endured and formed a community that helped keep their members safe.
This is dragon breath.
Don't you listen to him, it's just the wind.
Episode 2 could have taken us to America. The dragons are seen traveling across the Atlantic, and while the military does its best to fight them, of course it's not easy. They win some battles and lose many more. Their strategies become more and more desperate. A wayward thrill seeker, who is self-centered but has a knack for skydiving, offers to jump out of a plane and tackle the dragon using a net. He is successful and continue to hone in on this particular method to fight other dragons. Meanwhile, researchers in some underground lab discover that the dragons are all female, and soon begin developing their thesis on how to take it down. The film climaxes when a low-ranking Matthew McConaughey and his crew try leaving the port and travel to England. As for the rebellious skydiver, he dies during a mission, where he ensures that they leave the port safely. Episode 3 has us catching up with our British community and checking in on what they're doing. We also find the Americans grappling to travel from the US. Dragons try attacking, but the surrounding water keeps them safe. The two groups eventually meet and struggle to get along, but finally work together to kill the male. Ultimately, the movie ends with a tableau of cultures fighting a common enemy and successfully killing the dragons in deserts, cold climates, and islands.
They're speaking French.
But don't come to me, I'm lousy at French.
Reign of Fire sequel. In spite of being a commercial failure, Rob Bowman's Reign of Fire in due course developed a huge cult following. So much so that the fans of the movie literally petitioned for a part 2. We kid you not.
Who's in charge?
Sharing a clip of his character, Denton Van Zandt from the original film, Matthew McConaughey, took to Twitter last year in December, hinting at the fair possibility of a movie sequel. Even his tweet was captioned 2021. This can only point towards two things: either a sequel is later set that year, or the possibility of sequel filming this year. Both ways, the fans of the movie are absolutely thrilled. While no official announcements have been made so far, it would be amazing to see the world of dragons explored once again in the follow-up. After all, there is so much left to discover. In fact, we don't even mind a television series. Fans of the movies just want to know more.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.